All right, continuing the exploration of the work for educational purposes and for gaining understanding, the work of Alexander Dugin. Received his book, The Fourth Political Theory, and read through a few of the chapters. The chapters are relatively short, and the writing or translation style is really succinct and to the point. And for someone with kind of a similar background that I have, I cut my intellectual teeth on political philosophy, political theory, and then really got into philosophy. So some of my favorite philosophers were the Gilles Deleuze and Martin Heidegger coming up, and he uses a lot of ideas here to weave what he calls is open source fourth political theory. What I really like about this is similarly, and the kind of vibe that I get is similar to the one that I got when I read Marx initially. I found his piercing intellect that is levying critiques that are pretty accurate. So I think a lot of his critiques of the trajectory of liberalism, he has a chapter titled The Metamorphosis of Liberalism and His Metamorphosis, where he goes through the history of liberalism and these different modes that it's transformed into. And he claims that right now we have a postmodern, grotesque, hyper neoliberalism, which is what he's ultimately critiquing here. So just like Marx had a pretty penetrating critique of the political economy, I think it fell short, and immediately Marx fell short in terms of the solution being presented. So I found the critique aspect of it compelling, but the solution aspect of it, the kind of the affirmative portion of the thinking ideology perspective here, it leaves me wanting. It kind of gives me pause, and both obviously in terms of Marx and Dugin here. But again, just getting into his work, and I'm interested to explore the constellation of ideas that are new to me and to a lot of people. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to be doing a deep dive in the book with a reading group. So I thought I'd read the relatively short introduction by Dugin here for you guys. Only a couple pages. I'll read some of the footnotes here. All right, so introduction, To Be or Not to Be. This book was written in 2009 in Russian. It was translated 2011, 2012. So again, introduction, To Be or Not to Be. In today's world, politics appears to be a thing of the past, at least as we used to know it. Liberalism persistently fought against those of its political enemies which had offered alternative systems, that is, conservatism, monarchism, traditionalism, fascism, socialism, and communism, and finally, in the end of the 20th century, had defeated them all. It would be logical to assume that politics would become liberal, while all of its marginalized opponents surviving in the peripheral fringes of global society would reconsider their strategies and formulate a new united front according to Alain de Bonnist's Periphery Against the Center. De Bonnist, or de Bonnat, founded the Groupement de Recherches pour la Civilisation Européenne, the first and most prominent group of what came to be termed the European New Right in 1968, and continues to be its most well-known representative. Not familiar with him at all. Instead, at the beginning of the 20th century, everything followed a different script. So he's saying here with the winning, the total victory of liberalism, we're supposed to have a new world order that is philosophically, ideologically, and politically liberal, with a set of values to get behind. But he says that's not what happened, and he's going to say here that the political is erased by this grotesque form of late liberalism. So he says liberalism, which had always insisted on de-emphasizing the importance of politics, made the decision to abolish politics completely after its triumph. Maybe this was to prevent the rise of political alternatives and to ensure its eternal rule, or because this political agenda had simply expired with the absence of ideological rivals, the existence of which Carl Schmitt, he was an important German jurist who wrote about political science, geopolitics, and constitutional law. He was part of the conservative revolutionary movement of the Weimar era. He also briefly supported the National Socialists at the beginning of the regime, although he later turned against them. He remains highly influential in the fields of law and philosophy. I've read a little bit of Schmitt, but not enough, and I've just recently was kind of looking towards his thought here. All right, yeah, Carl Schmitt, which had considered indispensable for the proper construction of a political position. This is an interesting footnote. Carl Schmitt wrote that the enemy is the, let me make sure I'm on the right one here. Yeah. The enemy is the, quote, the shape or configuration of our own question in the theory of the partisan. A footnote to this phrase in the Telos Press edition of this work notes that its meaning is explained in Schmitt's post-war notebooks. And here's a quote from those notebooks. Historia in nous, history in a nutshell. Friend and enemy. The friend is he who affirms and confirms me. The enemy is he who challenges me. Who can challenge me? Basically only myself. The enemy is he who defines me. That means in concerto, only my brother can challenge me and only my brother can be my enemy. That is the footnote from Carl Schmitt. Regardless of the rationale, liberalism did everything possible to ensure the collapse of politics. At the same time, liberalism itself has changed, passing from the level of ideas, political programs, and declarations to the level of reality, penetrating the very flesh of the social fabric, which became suffused with liberalism, and in turn, it began to seem like the natural order of things. He says in a later chapter that liberalism became part of the collective subconscious and just the way things are. Kind of status quo ad infinitum. This was presented not as a political process, right? The natural order of things, liberalism turned into the natural order of things. This was presented not as a political process, but as a natural and organic one. As a consequence of such a historical transformation, all other political ideologies passionately feuding against each other during the last century lost their currency. Conservatism, fascism, and communism, together with their many variations, lost the battle, and triumphant liberalism mutated into a lifestyle. Consumerism, individualism, and postmodern manifestation of the fragmented and sub-political being. Politics became biopolitical, moving to the individual and sub-individual level. It turns out that it was not only the defeated political ideologies that left the stage, but politics itself, and even liberalism in its ideological forms exited. This is why it became nearly impossible to imagine an alternative form of politics. Those who do not agree with liberalism find themselves in a difficult situation. The triumphant enemy has dissolved and disappeared. Now they are left struggling against the air. How can one engage in politics if there is no politics? There's only one way out: to reject the classical political theories, both winners and losers, strain our imaginations, seize the reality of a new world, correctly decipher the challenges of postmodernity, and create something new, something beyond the political battles of the 19th and 20th centuries. Such an approach is an invitation to the development of the fourth political theory, beyond communism, fascism, and liberalism. To move forward towards the development of the fourth political theory, it is necessary to, and in these bullet points you see what he's kind of defining here in his critique, or his affirmation of the fourth political theory. You find a critique of this late liberalism. One, reconsider the political history of recent centuries from new positions beyond the frameworks and cliches of the old ideologies. 2, realize and become aware of the profound structure of the global society emerging before our eyes. 3, correctly decipher the paradigm of postmodernity. 4, learn to oppose not the political idea, program, or strategy, but the quote-unquote objective reality of the status quo, the most social aspect of the apolitical, fractured post-society. And then finally here we get into kind of his project into the future, and finally construct an autonomous political model which offers a new way and a project for the world of deadlocks, blind alleys, and the endless recycling of the quote-unquote same old things. Post-history according to Baudrillard. Here's a footnote. So Baudrillard was a French philosopher and cultural theorist who is regarded as one of the most important postmodernist thinkers. In several of his works, such as The Illusion of the End, he posited that civilization is entering a period in which the notion of history itself and of historical progress as described by Marx no longer has any meaning. Therefore, history is ending, not because any sort of goal has been reached, but because history has become irrelevant. Continuing with the text, this book is dedicated to this very problem. As the beginning of the development of the fourth political theory, through an overview and re-examination of the first three political theories and to the closely related ideologies of National Bolshevism and Eurasianism that came very close indeed to the fourth political theory, this is not dogma, nor a complete system, nor a finished project. This is an invitation to political creativity, a statement of intuitions and conjectures, an analysis of new conditions, and an attempt to reconsider the past. The fourth political theory is not the work of a single author, but is rather a trend comprising a wide spectrum of ideas, researches, analyses, prognoses, and projects. It's interesting that Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari wrote 1,000 Plateaus together, and they had a similar sentiment at the beginning of the book. Say this was not written by two individuals, but a constellation or set of ideas intersecting and interacting with each other. Back to the text here. Anyone thinking in this vein can contribute his own ideas. As such, more and more intellectuals, philosophers, historians, scientists, scholars, and thinkers will respond to this call. It is significant that the book Against Liberalism by the renowned French intellectual Alain de Benoist, which has also been published in Russian by Amphora, has a subtitle, Towards the Fourth Political Theory. Undoubtedly, many things can be said on this theme by representatives of both the old left and the old right, and most likely even by liberals themselves who are conceptualizing qualitative changes to their own political platform, even while politics is disappearing. So that's it. Short one, just to introduce this book and kind of the initial idea of the fourth political theory. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll be back soon.